Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. So today we're going to be building a test framework from scratch, something like a Jest clone, and we're going to be building this in under 10 minutes. If you enjoyed this kind of content, please consider subscribing, and let's get right into it. So I've got a brand new project here with nothing in it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the Jest getting started guide. I'm just going to copy over their kind of files and examples on how to get started. I'm going to skip the installation step so we don't add Jest, but we're just going to try get it to work. So first step, I'm going to initialize my npm project with yarn init, passing in the -y flag just to skip all the questions. And then I'm going to add the two files that are in the documentation here. So that's some.js and some test.js. So let's do that just now. Some.js, there we go. And some.test.js. And we're just going to add in the test. Of course, this is just calculating the sum of two numbers and returning that. And finally, I'm just going to add this script tag to my package.json. Now, of course, this won't work because we haven't actually added Jest. But what we are going to do is we're going to add our own Jest equivalent, and we're just going to call that Jest.js. There we go. And I'll just add that file just now, Jest.js. And right now, the only thing I'm going to do here actually is I'm going to actually just require our test file, just so we can start off with running the test first, and then we'll work our way back. So let's just do require some.test.js. So heading over to our test file, of course, if I try to run this, so if I go to package.json and I try to run this test, it's of course going to fail. And the reason it's going to fail is because, well, the test function isn't defined. And in fact, if we head over back to our some.test.js, the expect and to be functions aren't defined either. So let's go ahead and define them and take it from there. So we'll start off with the test function, and I'm just going to comment out the assertion for now. We'll just focus on the test function, and I'm just going to create a function called test. And the first argument it's going to take is the name, and the second argument here is basically the function or the test function or the test callback. So I'm just going to call this text function. And the idea of running these tests is basically we want to run the test function and make sure it just doesn't throw any errors, and that's basically all there is to it. So I'm just going to add a try catch here. Oops, there we go. And what we're going to do is we're just going to run the test function, which is the callback that's being passed in. And if it passes, that's fine. We're just going to console log the test name with a tick. So what I'll do is I will add this tick here, and I will pass in the name. And if it fails, then we're just going to console log the name, but we're going to add an X instead across. And what we'll do as well is we'll also log the error that's passed in. And it should just be as simple as that to get it running. So if I now run this, what I should see is, great, I got the tick and the name. Of course, we're not doing anything. But if my test throws something, so it throws an error. So if there's an error, and let's just type in with a message, what we should see is a failing test, and we should see our message. So if I just bring this up, so we can see the X there with the name, and we can see our message. And that's the basic fundamentals of our actual test function. So next up, let's implement our assertions. So the assertions should be relatively straightforward as well. And that, of course, depends on how many assertions or matchers you're going to implement. So we're just going to add this, basically this to be matcher. And we're just going to leave it at that for this case here, but you'll be able to see how you can add kind of additional matches onto that after. So what we're going to do is we're going to add this expect function. Now this expect function here is taking in the actual value, so the received value. I'm going to call this received, and what it's returning here is actually an object, and this object contains a function, and these functions are your matchers. So I'm just going to add the to be function here. So that's a function, and that gets in the expected value. So this function here, we're just going to compare the expected and received and simply throw an error if they don't match. So if the received is not equal to expected, I'm going to keep it very simple. All we're going to do is we're going to throw an error, and that's it. We're just going to add a bit of an error here. So we're just going to say this is what we received, just like this, received, and then we're going to say the expected value here just for slightly nice, expected slightly nice logging. There we go. So that's all we need. This throws the error, which is then caught in the test function, which is how it's displayed. So let's see if that's all working. So I'm going to run the test again, and this passes, no issues there. But of course, if I change this value from 3 to 4, let's say, and we run that one more time, we can see that that fails. Again, it's got the name and it's got our nice error here. We received 3, but we expected 4. Perfect. So let's pop that back to 3. So now this is of course all working, but we still have the test and expect function all within our file. So let's extract them out and put them into some sort of global area, and then we'll focus on how we get all the tests running, because of course right now we are just directly inside our Jest file, just directly running this one file. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file, and I'm going to call this I guess I'm going to call this testsuite.js. So this is going to be our test suite, and we're going to go over to the some test file, and we're just going to take our 2 functions from there and we're going to paste them into the test suite. What we're going to do here, in fact, is we're going to add these to the node global variable. So there is a global variable that exists with node, and we're just going to add a test function onto that, which just is our test function. And we're going to do the exact same for our expected function. So again, we're going to add expect and expect. There we go. So because we're adding these to the global, we should be able to access these on the global scope as long as this file is imported. So if I hit play now, it's not going to work because we've not actually imported this file, so it doesn't understand where to get it from. How do we solve that? Well, we can go over to package.json, and instead of just running node.js, we can basically tell it to load the test suite module. So we can say -r, i.e. load this module, and that's, I think it needs to be testsuite.js. So load this module, which adds the globals, and then run our tests. So if I run play now, this should all run fine, and it's picking up the tests. And if I can just jump into sum.test, and if I command B into that, it recognizes this is where the test is coming from. So the final step here, of course, is how do we get it to run all our tests instead of just this single test. So let's add another test here, another sum test. So let's just call this one another add. 1 + 1 is equal to 2, so that's fine. And of course, if I run this now, it's not going to pick up this test because we're running specifically this file only. So how do we do that? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to run over to our jest.js file. And instead of just requiring a hard-coded file, we're going to search for anything or any file that ends in .test.js, and we're going to require them dynamically. So to help us do this, we're going to import a dependency called glob, G-L-O-B, and that's just basically going to help us pattern match all the files in this directory. So I'm going to add glob as a dev dependency, and then here I'm going to import it in. So glob is equal to require glob. Perfect. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the glob function. So that takes in a pattern. In this case, I'm just going to say find me all files that end in .test.js. This can be anything you like. You can pass in options here, but we don't have any options that we're going to pass in. Alternatively, you can just pass in the callback directly. So we can pass in the function callback, and the callback is, it provides an error and it provides the list of files that it finds for you, just like that. This is a bit weird with the options thing, but if you check the code base there, first thing it does is it basically checks if it's a function and then assigns CB, the callback, to options. So although it says options here, it is the actual callback, and that's absolutely fine. So what we're going to do here is we can actually just console.log files just to see what it returns. If I just run play here, we can see that it basically goes through and it returns anything that's test.js. And the good thing about this is it does this recursively. So even if you have files within nested directories, this is going to work absolutely fine. So what we're going to do finally is we're just going to basically loop over our files, and we're just going to require them. So for each file, we're going to require the file, and the only thing we're going to add here, just to get this working, is the / just to make it a relative path. There we go. So I think that should be everything. So it's going to find all our test files, it's going to require all of them, and as it goes in requiring each test, then it's just going to execute the global test function. So I'm going to remove this here. I'm going to run play one last time, second last time. There we go. We can see both our tests are passing. And the final thing here, just to kind of make sure that the glob is working fine, I'm going to add a directory. Here we go, called source, and I'm just going to move all my logic for the sum and the tests, there we go, into source. So I'll refactor them, kind of a typical pattern, and I'll press play again just to make sure it hasn't broken anything. There we go. And of course, Jest looks for a bit more than that, but I think this is going to do for our little clone just now. And there you have it. You can see there, just in a few lines of code, we've built a very, very, very minimal version of Jest. And of course, this kind of same pattern or same framework applies to the majority of test frameworks out there. You're running the tests, you're checking if they throw exceptions, you're logging the errors, and there's of course a lot of things that we're missing out, but this is probably a good place to start understanding how kind of these test frameworks work. So yeah, I think I'll wrap the video up there. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good day, and I will see you in the next one.